The feet are out super wide because a wider base of support is a little bit easier for them. But like, what position are you training here? Like, translate that to a standing position. It's like, that's great that you're strong and stable in this position, but it's a lousy position. So kind of anytime you're doing like a plank or floor work, try to translate it to like, you know, imagine if you were standing. Is that a good position? Not really. So today I just want to go over quadrupeds and what you should be focusing on in that basic 4-point stance, what you should be looking for, what you should be trying to avoid, and kind of what you should be feeling when you're in those positions. Then there's a bunch of different variations that I really enjoy because the regular movement isn't quite hard enough, and then I'll just quickly demonstrate those and go over some of the nuances of those variations. Alright, so the basic quadruped 4-point stance, a good place to start is with the hands right underneath the shoulders. You want the index finger pointing forward so you can externally rotate the shoulders. Knees should be roughly in front of the hips, so when you load into the toes, the knees sort of end up directly underneath the hips. And then from here, you need to be actively pressing into the floor. That way you don't sink into the shoulder blades, and you need to be pressing your feet back. The reason you want to press the feet back is to get engagement through the posterior chain, particularly the glutes. So this is a really challenging movement to keep kind of that back flat and keep your hips in a good position the whole time. The glutes are a great stabilizer of the hips. So if you don't push back into your feet and engage that posterior chain, you're just going to be asking your hip flexors and your quads to be stabilizing your hips. It's not the ideal situation. So again, try to get that back pretty level. You're active in the shoulders. You're actively pressing into the balls of your feet, engaging that posterior chain. Then you draw the belly button in towards your spine, and holding that position for most people is good enough. So when I'm working with an individual on that movement, the things I'm looking for, well, it's a lot more nuanced. Knees directly underneath the hips. I want the feet, knees, and hips all in a line. So a lot of times you'll see something like this. I can do it forward. Where the feet are out, a bit more narrow. The feet are out super wide because a wider base of support is a little bit easier for them. But like, what position are you training here? Like, translate that to a standing position. It's like, that's great that you're strong and stable in this position, but it's a lousy position. So kind of anytime you're doing like a plank or floor work, try to translate it to like, you know, imagine if you were standing. Is that a good position? Not really. So make sure the feet are in line with the knees and the shoulders and the hips. Everything's lined up really nicely. Nothing wonky out to the side. I also look at people's shoulder blades, especially as they're fatiguing. A lot of people sink into the shoulder blades. That's kind of just losing the active press into the ground. They're just not active in the shoulders anymore. And another benefit of this movement, serratus anterior activation, as long as you're not sunk into the shoulder blades, like, you want to be pressing into the ground. It's not a passive movement with your shoulders. So you're actively pressing into the ground. That'll help engage the serratus anterior. That helps stabilize the shoulder blade and the scapula. It's kind of a tricky muscle to recruit, and a lot of people don't know about it for kind of scapular control. Just another good benefit to this movement. So on all of these variations, the basics stay the same. Shoulders lined up over the wrists, knees are directly underneath the hips, belly button drawn in towards the spine. You're actively pressing back into the ball of your feet. That's going to help engage the posterior chain. Then we just add slight little variations to that original movement. One of the first ones to do, once you're pretty comfortable with this regular quadruped movement, from here, pull one leg up, and this is a step. So quadruped with a step, you just bring one leg up and back. So when you take that step forward, that split second that the foot is off the ground as you go forward and then come back to your starting position, as you take the step forward with the right, what wants to happen, your hips want to dip down to that side, so you need all the external rotators on the left side to start firing. Internal, external obliques are helping stabilize the hips and the torso as well. You just get a lot of extra work from a tiny little movement, just stepping the foot forward, back to your starting position, and then do the opposite leg. Next one is just a slightly harder iteration of the step. It's keeping the foot up off the ground as you drive one knee up. This would be a quadruped with knee drive. Same basic starting position, everything is stacked up nicely, loading weight into the toes from here, drive the knee forward, pause for a few seconds, and then come back. So everything I said about the previous movement where your hips want to rotate down towards the ground, that's true here. It's just a longer time you need to stabilize yourself. And it ends up being an anti-rotational movement with that pause as you drive the knee up, pause for a few seconds, and then you step back to the starting position. That whole time, your body wants, if you're driving the right knee up, your body wants to dip down to the right just because gravity's just pulling you down. Everything on the left side, you're getting a lot more work. All right, so the next version after that, we just kind of challenge the hip stability by going to a single leg position. Now we'll do the same thing with the upper body, going to the shoulders. So on these, the challenge is to do them with your hands underneath the shoulders. So the cheat is kind of pulling the hands to the inside. So when you go to that single arm, your hand is basically underneath your center line. The challenge is keeping the hands in the same position and just doing a shoulder tap, opposites back and forth. I'll show these from the front. So from here, stacked up nicely. All you're trying to do, stabilize everything. Go to that single arm back and forth. Try to keep the hips and shoulders from rotating back and forth. A lot of times you'll see this. I'm exaggerating, but not a ton. That's what you end up seeing. You want as little movement through the hips and shoulders as possible. If you want an extra challenge, talk while you're doing it. All right, so last iteration on the ground, just for variety, I'll do it facing this way. This would be a quadruped walk in place. So if you were to do this movement and you were to travel, you'd be moving the opposite arm and the opposite leg. So we're just gonna do one step forward, come back to our starting position. One step forward with the opposite side, back to our starting position. And since we're doing it in place, you can challenge that position by reaching the arm out in front of you, pausing for a second, then coming back. Looks like this. Again, same starting position, shoulders over the hips, shoulders under the hips. Damn it. All right, wrists underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips, load weight into the toes. As you come out, opposite arm, opposite leg, back to your starting position. Opposite arm, opposite leg. Oh, I'm shaking. Those are very challenging. So don't try to do those until you've kind of mastered the other iterations that came before it. All right, so for an added layer of complexity and difficulty, add instability to the system. So with your hands on the ground, you're in a closed chain system. This is still closed chain, it sucks. It's much harder doing this on a ball, and you're not gonna be on the hands, you're gonna be on the forearms. So the challenge here is keeping the shoulders in a good position, because a lot of people will get on the ball and immediately they just internally rotate and kind of dump the shoulders forward. So on these, try to keep the shoulders externally rotated and stay strong in that shoulder position throughout sort of the low plank on the ball. So even though you're not on your hands here, you're gonna be in the forearms, it still needs to be an active shoulder position so you can get the serratus anterior to work and basically hold your shoulder blades in a good position. If you end up fatiguing, and this is what I see most often, people get into the elbows, you're gonna be totally sunk into the shoulder blades. Once the upper back goes, the lower back is gonna follow. So my main cue for this, get the shoulders lined up over the elbows, and then don't let yourself sink into the elbows too much. Stay active by pressing the hands down. You're gonna stay active through the triceps, and that'll help recruit the shoulders to stay fired and stay active throughout the movement. Everything else though stays the same in the lower body. Knees are still underneath the hips. Pressing your weight back into the balls of your feet to recruit the posterior chain, especially the glutes. Don't rely on the muscles in front of your body to stabilize your hips. That's a lousy strategy. Belly button in towards the spine, recruit the TVA, get that working as well. You're gonna see me shake on these. So into the elbows, shoulders are lined up over the elbows, but I'm actively pressing into the ball. I like to make a fist just for kind of the idea of if you make a fist, it'll help you recruit everything upstream. So that's what I'm gonna do. Again, don't go too wide with the feet. Press into the ball, and you're here. This is the most basic position. This would just be a hold. Next version, quadruped on the ball with side to side. This is just adding a little bit of movement to the upper body. Stabilize the hips, shift your weight very slowly side to side. If you start losing your position, go back to just the hold or come down to rest and get back going in a good position again. So again, shoulders are over the elbows. I'm still actively pressing into the ball, trying to keep my forearms parallel to the ground. Load weight into the toes. And I'm just gonna shift weight side to side. I love when I demonstrate this for clients, and I do it for like 5 seconds and I'm already shaking. They're like, oh great, this should be fun. So that's quadruped on the ball with side to side. Last two versions, these are similar to ones that we did on the ground. It's a step and a knee drive. So again, back onto the ball. In here, the first one is a step. Try to keep the back in a good position. Just step forward, plant the foot down, and then back to your starting position. Foot comes forward, plant it down, back to your starting position. Last one is a knee drive, so you're gonna drive the knee towards the ball, but the foot doesn't come down. So again, it's that anti-rotational stuff we were talking about earlier. Good setup, active in the glutes. TVA is on by pulling the belly button in towards the spine. Back in, knee up to the ball, and back. Try to keep the hips, shoulders, back as level as you can. Don't want a lot of deviation side to side. None of that funky stuff. Keep it tight. Pause for a second and back down. And throughout that, if it looked like my back was in a weird, my lower back was in a weird position, it looked like I was almost like rounded through some of them. Two reasons. One, I'm tired. Just did a ton of examples and I was trying to talk through it. Two, I hurt my back bull riding and I have a heat pack and tape and a big lump on my lower back right now. So that's what that was.